But I wanted to ask a more general question regarding something you just mentioned. Like, something that's more unique to the United States are the different policies and the federalist system that it functions upon. And how have some of these fault lines between policies in different states posed potential issues for civil rights as a whole?
Well, there's a kind of a positive story and a negative story. I think the positive story is that states exercise real authority in many, many areas of daily life and society and politics, the economy. And that does enable different states to experiment with the policy preferences of their residents to some extent. State legislatures are not perfectly responsive. They don't always reflect the genuine wishes of their constituents. Gerrymandering and other distortions of elections and voting mean that there are a number of state legislatures that are quite out of step, unfortunately, with their constituents, but not all. And the result is that we do get to experiment to some extent with different approaches, from criminal justice to gun safety to environmental measures to education policy. Pick your area. I think that can be useful. We can learn collectively from that experience, and we can understand better how certain policy changes in fact translate into daily life. And then the federal government, Congress, can draw on that experience in trying to fashion policies nationwide. So that's the kind of positive story. There is a negative story too. There can be states that are hostile to civil rights. Right now we see just the most inhumane, unconscionable attacks on transgender youth, for instance, in some states. I think, again, politics is driving a certain amount of this. Republicans have no good economic policy, tax policy. They have bad policy ideas that they know the public doesn't like. They want to cut taxes for the rich and starve the poor. No one wants that. So they're trying to divert this political conversation to guns and now transgender youth. But it's led to Texas and Missouri and a few states adopting just the most horrific medieval policies, threatening to separate parents and children. Anyhow, this is an example of state experimentation gone wrong, and going into a terrible, terrible place. And for that, we do sometimes need the federal government to step in and check the kind of worst base impulses of some states. I don't know that the federal government can do that. And there are sometimes enormous conflicts between the federal government and the states in the civil rights era, in the Trump era. And we'll see that as the Biden administration tries to protect children and their parents in places like Texas. So that's the dark side of federalism. It does leave some space for states to do some pretty terrible things.